Hello everyone. This video is about the situation regarding peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. Let's talk about the situation in Ukraine as of the 15th. First of all, the UK, France, Germany, and Poland, these four countries, went to Kiev and then together with Ukraine published a final ultimatum to Russia, demanding that Russia immediately cease fire for 30 days. If Russia does not cease fire, they will impose comprehensive sanctions. That's true. Will increase sanctions. The sanction measures already on the desktop, just waiting for Russia. This increased sanctions, what exactly are they? Generally speaking, according to current reports, there are 500 ships, black ship, that is, used to transport Russian oil. Most likely, these ships will be sanctioned. These ships transport Russian oil. They will no longer be allowed go to Europe. These countries, for life. Sanctions. Those ships will be afraid, because in the future they won't be able to enter European ports. And will there also be financial sanctions? Sanctions. Or completely stop buying Russian oil, natural gas. Now there are some channels. Russian banks. Russian bank. There is this channel. Go to Europe. Doing business. If these channels are closed, that would deal a further blow to Russia's economy. So what's Russia's response? I won't accept your ultimatum. I'll ignore you. So what's the U.S. position? The U.S. supports a 30-day ceasefire. Even China has stepped up to support a 30-day ceasefire. Then this is given to me. A lot of pressure on Russia. So Putin said, let's not talk about a ceasefire. Let's talk about peace talks directly. If you look at the whole situation, Kiev, I want to say this to Europe. A ceasefire. That must mean Russia has a battlefield advantage. Otherwise, why would they be in such a hurry? You can tell by what people are doing. Know who battlefield aids. That is to say, Russia. More than 100 aircraft in total, drones to attack Kiev. Russia is attacking Kiev's infrastructure. Those infrastructure make this. The Ukrainian government feel the pain. So the Ukrainian government is now demanding an immediate 30-day ceasefire. All right, now the US and China have both joined in and are putting on pressure. So now, what else can Europe do to apply pressure? Moscow is still acting this way. If you still refuse to cease fire, Europe will further increase its support, Ukraine's strength. Then the US says, funding Ukraine's war effort. This matter is over. But the US can use contracts like the ones used during World War II, back in those days. So you have to give this. Even Sedge hasn't been given to Ukraine yet. You'll have to fulfill your promises in the future. What tricks does Putin have? What diplomatic moves to stall the matter? He says he can meet directly with Zelensky over in Turkey. That is, Erdogan said he would host this peace talk. Remember, when the Russia-Ukraine war first started, it was in Turkey. Istanbul representatives of both parties discussed another framework for peace talks. Later, the UK told Ukraine not to accept it, so Ukraine withdrew. So basically, the US said, this is an opportunity, and told Zelensky to go. Zelensky said he would go. and on the 15th he would fly to Turkey to wait for Putin to come for peace talks. Let's talk about the positions of both sides. Roughly speaking, what is Ukraine's position? Ukraine's position, what can be promised is, they will recognize the areas that Russia actually controls right now. Under the current ceasefire, that is, aside from Crimea, 4 state territories, parts of each oblast, and as for Luhansk, it's almost 100% controlled. The others are less than that. Zaporizhia and Kherson are much less. Now, the second point is that they only recognize it as a fact, but will not recognize it legally. They want to join the EU. Third, their security must be guaranteed. As for what it means to have security guarantees, after 4 days, one way is, if they can't join NATO, just want European countries to send troops to Ukraine. Because Ukraine has been invaded many times, including at the time the Budapest Memorandum, and later. After 2014, there were also 2 Minsk agreements. In the end, Putin went back on all of them. At the time, he promised a ceasefire. The Budapest Memorandum promised that, after he cancelled the nuclear bomb, their security would be guaranteed. All can't be done. So of course, when it comes to Russia, there is no trust. So the only thing they can accept, just want European troops from European countries, troops that are actually capable of fighting, not just peacekeeping forces stationed in Ukraine. But what does Russia want? They say they want Ukraine legally recognize. Now in Russia, the occupied territory is Ukrainian. Ukraine agrees to join NATO, which both sides have no issue with, but he wants Ukraine to disarm and remain permanently neutral, meaning they would not accept European troops or British and French troops to Ukraine. Later it became Russia, semi-colony, because it would no longer have the ability to resist Russia. This is equivalent to after World War II, Finland and Austria had this kind of intuition, and in history we call this Finlandization. In other words, you also have to go through denazification. So-called denazification means specifically excluding, in this context, those strong Ukrainian nationalists. It has become a must to be pro-Russian. This government must be pro-Russian. And it cannot. For example, the country cannot use Ukrainian as the official language, must give Russian equal status. This is a two-way between the two sides' positions. All right. All along, on the battlefield, things are currently at a stalemate. Meanwhile, Russia continues to have the capability to strike at Ukraine's infrastructure. Electrical/mechanical facilities are important. Ukraine has its own circumstances, but Russia is able to endure hardship and has greater endurance capacity than Ukraine because most of the targets hit in Ukraine are power plants and those heating facilities. All right, so in these past few days, if Zelensky meets with Putin, will the two of them be able to reach an agreement? Putin wants to return to the previous Istanbul negotiation framework, but the European countries say that you can't block this. Ukraine and this European Union from becoming de facto allies. You can't stop Ukraine from strengthening its national defense. Ukraine would lack weapons, but I am Donald Trump at that time. I've already said Ukraine to ceasefire in 6 months. Basically, Putin is making his final gamble. That is, without American After assistance. Can the Ukrainian army still keep fighting? If the Ukrainian army manages to keep fighting, then there's no other choice. They can only agree to a ceasefire, because Russia. In fact, there are too many. Price in terms of manpower, whether it's lives or material resources,